All right, let's go ahead and call the meeting to order. Let's see here, and we'll go ahead and start with. Oh, we do have a flag, Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, if we can do a roll call, I think the sheet is coming around. I can do it. Sure, we had that coming up next, but I think it makes sense to do it. I agree. So we do have two new board members joining us today, and Mark Porter and Kat Kleeman. Kleeman? I thought I had it right. I'm sorry, Kat. If you guys would please stand, and Nikki's going to go ahead and swear you in. Kleeman.
Okay, just to let you know, I'm going to either swear or affirm. You could choose one. You don't have to say both. Always do that. And it'll say, "So help me God," or "under the penalties, pains and penalties of perjury." You could choose one. You don't have to say both.
Is there a separation between the two of those?
Yeah, there's separation. Anyway, so raise your right hand. Any photo ops?
Yeah, brought the child.
I
Mark Porter,
do solemnly swear or affirm.
do solemnly swear
Do solemnly swear, affirm, etc.
Okay, that I will faithfully execute the office,
that I will faithfully execute the office,
duty, or trust of the Burlington Board of School Commissioners
duty or trust of the Burlington School Commissioners,
to the best of my judgment
best of my judgment
To the best of my judgment.
and ability according to law.
and ability according to law.
So help me God, or under the pains and penalties of perjury.
So help me God.
Thank you.
Well, welcome to Mark and Kat, our two newest members, obviously, here. We'll go ahead and I'll just do a quick roll call. Brian Chena.
Here.
Liz Curry.
Here.
Kyle Dodson. Here. Charlie Giannoni. David Kirk.
Yes, here.
Kat Kleeman. Alan Matson.
Here.
Mark Porter.
Here.
Stephanie Seguino. Scott Shumsky.
Present.
Miriam Stoll.
Here.
Ben Truman.
Here.
Xander Long. Is Xander here today? Nor is Henry. All right. Nor is Georgia. I don't know if everyone got it this one. Before we move on, the board wishes to recognize, welcome, and thank those who are providing language interpretation for the board proceedings. The board's commitment that all children receive equitable academic services must ensure that new American parents are welcome and can attend meetings, understand the process, and be actively engaged. Interpretation of proceedings honors, respects, and values our new American parents and students. The board asks the public and media to respect and understand the importance of this interpretation. All right, at this point, if we could have a motion to approve the agenda. Commissioner Truman, seconded by Commissioner Matson. Any amendments or alterations of the agenda? Did you have something, Alan?
No. Okay, I found it.
All right. All in favor of the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Public comment. I did. Is there a sign-up sheet right there, Mark, next to you? I'm sorry.
Yeah, there's two names on it.
Actually, Brian, do you mind just reading the?
Terry Buhner, and then Susan Comerford.
Okay. Terry?
You can't respond, I'm seeing your smiles, this is good, having a good summer, and I'm here to thank you for responding to the hearing regarding conflict of interest. I think we're getting closer to a date. What I would like to know is probably the ground rules would be nice, location and date. And I think we're ready to go on that. The other thing I would like to talk about is the fact that there are some outstanding contracts that have not been completed in regards to negotiations. The paraeducators for one. It would be nice if the board did address it. I know that it is summer, but these people are going to be going back to school in August as paraeducators, as staff members. You have quite a bit out there that needs to be addressed. And I do know that the House, well, let's put it this way, there's much in the House that needs to be put in order, okay? And I know you're working very hard on it. So, you know, but yet we have these other issues that still need to be addressed. Outside of that,
Not Brazil.
Not Brazil. That's what I just heard. So outside of that, again, I want to thank you, okay, for responding. I've been waiting throughout the first and at the end of June and the first part of July regarding the hearing, and looks very positive. Looking forward to it. And again, just to sum this up, contracts need to be addressed, okay? The morale of the staff is very low, okay, for a variety of reasons. This is one thing, okay, that the board can do in regards to addressing contracts and getting them negotiated and finalized. That could help raise the morale. That is not done. The morale will continue to remain low, actually lower than it is right now. And that would not be good, I don't think, for anybody in our community. So thank you very much. On that note, have a nice rest of the summer. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Susan Comerford. I'm a long-term follower of the board, and I'm here tonight to talk about special education. I know many of you on the board, and my daughter is now 14 on her way to the high school, and I am in the midst of filing an administrative complaint with the state because I noticed, well, let me back up and first say that as a parent of a child with special needs, it always feels as if you're walking the edge of a razor. Everything that happens to your child in a more intensified way when the child has special needs is mediated by your relationships with the people around you, the teachers in particular and the administration. And so I noticed that my daughter, was talking about, oh, I didn't have speech today, And let me just also say parenthetically that this is not about an individual teacher at all. In fact, my daughter loves this teacher. It's more about, the lack of accountability and lack of systems within the district, and particularly within Edmonds Middle School, to appropriately track and monitor what happens to a child when the teacher's out and they're supposed to receive mandated IEP services. So my daughter has severe apraxia of speech. She's supposed to have speech 4 days a week, and then the fifth day, she has speech that's sort of folded into social thinking. So there was some major thing happened in the woman's family, which was a terrible thing, and I'm very sorry about that. And she was out for 2 more weeks. So I'm thinking to myself, what do we do? I'm the person who is the advocate for my child, and at the same time, I try hard to support the teachers, that work with my child. And so I did what I've done several times since I've had a child in the school district. I called the state education office. And I said to them, this is the situation. I really don't know how much speech he's actually missed because I don't check it every day and I don't keep a track. And I said, can I ask? And they said, yes, you can ask. You can ask for an accounting of how many days that teacher was out, and without mentioning names of people, 26 days. If I had not brought it up, it would not have been addressed. I have a PhD, I'm a social work faculty, I have really, really strong advocacy skills. If this happens to my kid, I'm not just here for my own child right now, because I can handle that. But I want you to know that I've been a really strong advocate for kids of color and ELL kids in the district for a long time, as most of you on the board for a long time know. And at the same time, I've been a strong advocate and actively working, particularly at Champlain Elementary, to develop systems that help all our kids appreciate each other in some new ways. I believe that what we're trying to do in the schools with our children is educate leaders, all of them. And I want leaders who are going to be able to be sensitive to the needs of everyone and learn how to communicate and include and respect. So I'm here tonight. I'm going to file my complaint. And I already talked to Mr. McNamara about this. And in fact, they made an accommodation that she's supposed to get speech, an extra time a day during the summer. Well, we've had 2 days, no speech at all so far, so she's missed 4 times. But I'm not doing it for that reason. The reason I'm doing it is so that we can develop systems of monitoring and accountability within all of the schools. So, so for instance, think of one of your children. They're in a math class, and the math teacher's gone for 26 days, and they don't get a substitute that knows math. What would you think? We'd be raising hell, all of us. So again, I'm not coming pounding the table, angry parent. I'm coming as a seasoned advocate and a friend of the district saying that we must do better. I follow all the minutes for all the committees, and I notice with great enthusiasm that the curriculum committee is their big goal is that everybody reads by 3rd grade. Well, I can tell you as a parent, that's not going to happen for my child by 3rd grade. I would like you to really look at that whole system, with incredible microscopes, because I could sit here for probably 6 hours and regale you with stories of things that have happened since she hit the 6th grade in middle school that just stun me. We had a situation this year where she was in a class and they all electronic there. And my kid is pretty good with the technology. She loves it. But it was a 5 or 6 step process to unload your stuff into the file of the teacher. And so she got a C in her report card. And I knew she's been doing the work because I've been sitting with her doing that work. And so I said at the IEP meeting, well, what happened here? Well, he basically was going to teach her a lesson. I said, is this a place for an accommodation? You need to be aware that there's lots going on in special education in our system, and I'm really aware because I'm on the board of Vermont Family Network, and I went to this conference in the spring, and I sat randomly next to some woman who's also living in our district and a few other people, and they went on and on and on. So I'm asking you, each and every one of you, to make, sort of bring a microscopic lens and also a helicopter view, both of those things, to special ed in the district. The budget issues are really important. The issues of upholding everyone who is diverse in one way or another is also really important. Kids with special ed, unless you have a very strong parent advocating every minute, they're lost. So I'm asking each and every one of you to take that up as part of your focus and your commitment, because those kids are getting the short shrift. And again, anybody wants to talk to me anytime, I can give you stories for hours. Thanks very much, and congratulations to a new superintendent, and thank you to everyone for all your hard work, and I know you've been putting in more hours than there are in days, so thank you.
No one else on the consent. Is there anyone else who would like to? All right. We have a quick minute for board reflections on the agenda. If there's anyone that wanted to reflect on public comment. Seeing none. Okay, Alan?
My understanding is we do have a, there is an update meeting on, or an update item on negotiations or contracts, right? Some
Yes.
kind of way. I just want to point that out so
Thank you.
Terry knew it was on the agenda.
Yeah.
That's it. That was just one point I wanted to make.
I'd like to thank Susie for her comments and just note that Dylan McNamara is not here tonight. He's the Director of Special Ed, and if it's okay with you, Susie, I will relay what you said to him.
Right?
Yeah, and what I would want to say about that too is I'm just wondering if we can contemplate where we might, not just following up with Dylan, but also where in the committees there might be room to look at some of the issues that Susie brought up. So.
I know that, I'll do a quick reflection, both in curriculum last year, in talking about differentiation of instruction, maybe as an umbrella, that certainly special education, I think, is a very important part of the concept of differentiating to meet all learners. And then I appreciate Susie mentioning diversity. I think it's expanding our definition of diversity to understand diversity of learning styles and needs, and is an important conversation to have. And I think that both in curriculum and in diversity, there's room to on those committees to really consider the role of special education and its application.
Just to be clear, I'm not asking that you consider the role of special education. I'm asking you to put monitoring systems in place.
I understand.
Okay.
No, I understand that. All right, board report. Brian, turn over to you for the superintendent search process.
So I'd like to make a motion to appoint Stephanie Phillips as interim superintendent.
Do we have a second for that? Commissioner Truman? Would you like to speak to Brian to the motion?
Sure. So we had an ad hoc interim search committee that was convened in late April, I believe, and over the last 2.5 months or so, we've gone through a process of discussing, what the best option for an interim superintendent would be. And I have some, I can share details about how we got from point A to point B if people want to hear it, but basically through that process we came to the conclusion that the best option, the best choice would be to appoint Stephanie, because she is already the acting superintendent, and that it would make more sense to have an internal candidate who understands where we're at, to take the lead and hold the ship stable right now, that there's been a lot of change, and that we then take our energy and direct it into a really good search for a permanent candidate who can then come in and make incremental changes over time as needed. So I'd be happy to share more about the details, because some people may want to hear that, but I don't want to give you a speech to start off unless you ask for it. So.
Any comments or anyone would like to speak to it? Commissioner Shumsky.
I'm opposed to this, and I want to say first off, it has nothing to do with Stephanie. I was very encouraged when Stephanie agreed to be the acting superintendent, because I do support her. I think she does an excellent job in the district from what I've seen, and I'm very happy with the job she's doing. My issue is the process. Roughly 2 weeks ago, Brian was named the chair of the interim superintendent search committee, and I spoke with him the day after. He had already spoke to Nikki and said, Nikki, what are we going to do about a process? He had talked about possibly, a 4-hour training session for members of the search committee where we'd come in, so we'd learn about biases, other issues. We talked about opening up the search for 2 weeks and then having it open or selecting our candidate within a week after that. So it'd be a 3-week process. I know that from talking to Brian and Kyle, some of the others, is that we had identified maybe 5 folks out of originally 30 that we thought would be a good fit for an interim superintendent search. We talked about possibly bringing in those folks for an interview. I think there are folks out there. And then just like Whiplash, then it changed, and then we decided that Stephanie was just going to become our interim superintendent. And I'm not comfortable with that process. Is the last full board meeting that we had is that we talked about having, we talked about this other process we were going, and now we've gone in a different direction. I think it does a couple things that we need to be careful of. Is that one is that I think Stephanie is very qualified to lead this district, but I also think she should be selected through an open and transparent process. And I think we need to open the process for 2 weeks because we have, as I've said many times, we have 1,500 people who work in this district. For all we know, there is somebody who, as greatly as capable as Stephanie is, maybe there's somebody else who's capable. Or someone brought it up to me today, is that Paul Irish holds a superintendent's license. Maybe Paul wants to apply for the interim position. Maybe he deserves to be interviewed for that. Paul's never expressed it to me. I don't know. But the point is, if you don't open the search process and you don't allow Paul to apply for it, Paul's just representative of possibly other people within the district. We need to treat this just like the other positions we've treated since I came on this board. It should be an open process. We should allow people to apply for the apply through the process. This isn't going to hold us back. Stephanie can be, I believe she's gracious enough to be acting superintendent through this process. We could do this in 3 weeks. In 3 weeks, we select our candidate. I personally think that Stephanie's probably going to be the choice after that. But I would say to the folks who try to rush it is, why can we not wait 3 weeks? Why can't we open this process to see if anyone in the 1,500 staff district that we serve, why don't we see if there are folks here that want to put their hat in the ring, and why should they not be interviewed? The other thing is in the community. You know, the point was made to me is like, well, everybody knows that if they didn't stick their name in yet. Well, let's make the process formal. It's open, and if Stephanie's the only person who applies, that's fine. But let's have a process where everybody has a chance. And that way, Stephanie has all the credibility that she deserves, which is she's a very credible candidate to be superintendent. In fact, my biggest concern about her, and you know, like any good employer, is I hope this happens to Stephanie, is she'll do a great job and some other district will hire her away because they'll love what good job she does here. I hope that for Stephanie. But I want her to get in that position because we chose her through an open and transparent process. And I just feel that this is exactly where this board has come a long way since we formed this new board. And I don't like where this decision's drifting. To me, this is more of a decision it's the type of decision that the old boards used to get criticized for. So I'd like to see a more transparent process.
Brian, did you want to respond to how?
You asked two questions that I think I'd like to address. One was why can't we wait longer? And one was why would we make a decision for interim that's different than the process for a full-time job? And
I didn't say full-time job. I just said different than other jobs.
Okay, so what I'm wondering is, Nikki, would you be comfortable saying something about interim versus a full-time position and how, you know, what's general practice, you know?
The general practice with interims is typically interims are appointed. This is an unusual circumstance only because it's a superintendent, and we had our superintendent resign or whatever by very late in the season. So typically though, interims are appointed, and the role of that interim is to provide stability until a permanent, whether it's a superintendent, a principal, or whatever, to provide some stability. In this particular instance, I would argue that time is not on your side. To spend that time, the time needs to be spent attempting to put together a permanent search, which is quite an endeavor for a superintendent, as it is for principals, but it's if we're gonna have all the community input and all those things that we would like to have in that search, we need to begin that search already. And in fact, Brian and I met, put together a plan, and that plan has just sat for the last 2 weeks because for some reason we weren't permitted to move forward, even though, frankly, you're gonna have to do it anyway. So I didn't understand the need to wait an additional 2 weeks. So the bottom line is, to be very honest with you, that's a process we need to, by September, to be engaging the community and looking for a permanent and doing a national search, which is going to require quite a bit for us. And we need that person signing on the dotted line before March 1st, because in March, every one of you are up for re-election. And because you're up for re-election, we will be thrown into another set of chaotic circumstances. If we didn't have a new board, I'm not suggesting you guys won't be the board, but we never know. And then we have a new board with all kinds of new ideas and ideas about who they think the superintendent should be. So the point is right now, your focus really needs to be on stability moving forward and really getting this search on its way for a solid superintendent for this district. So again, the short answer, not that it could be short now, is that typically interims are appointed. It happens across the district, and again, your goal should be stability, and definitely certainly provides that stability along with the other senior directors that will be supporting her.
And Nikki, just because you answered on that, is that how many interim superintendent and I'm in your tenure here, how many interim superintendents have you appointed?
I'm saying that everyone else gets a first chance before you get.
Just you asked Brian to respond to the questions.
Brian to respond to the questions, and he's.
Well, I just okay.
Scott, was it more that you wanted to say?
Well,
Brian
I wanted to
responds
ask Nikki
Scott?
another question to just get more of an answer about this. Would it be outside of general practice for us to engage in a detailed search for an interim position?
That would be unusual.
Okay.
Although, I guess what I would say, since I think I know where Scott was going, is that again, we haven't had to do this for a superintendent because this is not how it normally happens.
Mm-hmm.
But typically, no, it is not unusual for an interim to be appointed.
Commissioner Porter?
We've had a harm done to us in the district, right? So we've had financial harm done to us in the district, and we've lost a superintendent, which brought a harm to the district. And I'm just not necessarily agreeing for the same reasons of Scott, but I think more importantly right now, it just comes down to transparency and quality. And the confidence that we've met both. On one side says an interim position by its definition is temporary. So the understanding that Stephanie can fill that position says that there's a capacity that's available in her time. And then when we come down to, Kyle's drive and the other curriculum committee's drive for, what we want to do and bring the funding down to those earlier grades, do we care that we might not have a curriculum director to guide that? We're under the pretext that we're going to fill this position by January 1st. Well, I work at a place where we haven't had a CIO for a year and a half, and the CFO was the interim. So I'd like to, if we just do a little bit more due diligence, if we say 2 weeks without impact, or 3 weeks without impacting the drive for the permanent position, just to do that little bit of due diligence that says we're going to be transparent and going to publish it out there. I don't know if 3 weeks is enough time. We could certainly can be arguing that. But if we did that, now we've built the transparency with the voters that changed all of us out recently. And we have a chance to say, is there a better quality? We have a responsibility to do that, right? And we also have a responsibility to say, do no harm, do no further harm. And by bringing Stephanie out of the curriculum position and into this, which could be for an extended period, are we causing harm backwards through the ranks through the curriculum committee, or through the curriculum lineage? That's all. Thank you.
Kirk?
I kind of want to echo a couple of things that were said here. First is by appointing somebody, we're not following what we said we were going to do ourselves over the last month since Jeannie's been left. I could have swore 2 weeks ago when we had a meeting that we set Brian forth to find the interim committee, chair the interim committee, and find an interim. So for 2 weeks we didn't advertise for that position because we didn't want to do what? I don't understand why at that point when they set forth the process and we did that, I don't understand why we stopped. Why aren't we moving forward? Why aren't we having a list? I'm not saying that we have the wrong candidate sitting at the table. Maybe she is, maybe she isn't. But that creates another hole by appointing this person. So now we have to search, or Nikki has to search for that position as well. We're searching for a position no matter what. We do have an appointed temporary person in that position. But if we don't open up the process and be clear and loyal to our people, to the public, then we're not doing them justice, I believe. I believe we need to open this up. I believe it needs to be open and clear, and I don't think it needs to be 3 months long. I agree with the Mark who just said, and Scott that said 2 weeks. What's wrong with 2 weeks? Why weren't we doing that for 2 weeks? Why weren't we gathering information for 2 weeks? Why didn't you have the training so that you could do the interviews? We haven't done any of that, and we've been, and Jeannie has been tentatively gone for 6 weeks. Okay, so we're dragging our feet. That's what's causing the delay. The delay is caused by us. So I think we need to step it up and move forward. And I think we need to open up the search. It's our fault that the search hasn't been done. It's our fault that we're dragging our feet. We should have had this position open to the public, accepting applications for people who wanted this position. We should have been doing that. It's our fault. The blame falls on us.
Commissioner Stoll?
I just have a question of clarification. So is it possible for Stephanie to remain an acting superintendent for some period of time as opposed to shifting her to interim?
Can I say something about that?
Go ahead, Brian.
So there's a piece here that no one's talking about, which so I'd like to provide some more information because when you say, well, you were appointed the chair and then 2 weeks went by without anything happening, that's not true. I agreed to be the chair of the interim search, which was a messy process.
Wait, excuse me, Brian. Yeah. I just wanted a quick answer to that question. I think it's a legal question, and my question is: can we have an acting superintendent if we do not have a permanent superintendent? So in other words, have we had a superintendent for a week or not? And if we decided as a body to maintain our current, she's acting, and then we do whatever we're doing about the interim, I'm asking if that's an option.
Do you have an answer for that?
Sort of. So the answer is what Brian was going to say, that the Agency of Education was our outside constituent that led us to recommend this decision, and they would be, we would be going back on the plan that we gave them. They were breathing down our necks. They wanted a plan. They wanted to know, and that was kind of the underlying wheel that turned this whole discussion.
I understand that, but I'm just looking for a legal, like what is it
legally? I mean, I guess it's a question for Nikki. There were kind of indications from Agency of Education. There were indications that if we didn't have one by July 1st, that would have serious implications in terms of our standing with them.
No, I understand.
So no one actually cited a statute or anything. Maybe Nikki knows one, but that was the heavy-handed message from the Agency of Education.
Okay. Well, maybe we don't have a clear answer to my question.
I'm working on a quick answer for it right
Thank
now.
you.
Commissioner Mattson.
Yeah, I had heard the information about the Agency of Education, and I just kind of wanted to ask further, and I know Brian stepped away, and I don't know if the question goes to Nikki, Liz, to whoever, a bit more about the role the agency played here in this, because this is, my first question is what had changed in the process, and I was given a fairly long answer when I was talking, I think it was to Brian primarily. Could someone just talk through what the how we interacted with the agency and what came from that? Because I would like to hear more about that. I think that as you were pointing out, has a pretty big role, and I don't know who's the appropriate party to talk to that question.
Yeah, I can address that. So the agency of Ed on a handful of different fronts had some concerns. Some of them were other things that we're going to be talking about tonight, about separation of our funds from the city, which had been done for decades, but they had recently arrived to say no, that's not the way that's going to be allowed anymore. The city has pushed that as well. That's one of the things. And then the agency was concerned about a leadership vacuum, and did press hard on us to find out what a plan was, what an acceptable plan was, and what an expedited timeline would make sense, both to fill the leadership vacuum that was currently that we currently found ourselves in, and then how we are going to move expeditiously toward finding a permanent superintendent. And the plan that was developed we felt that the committee, and I'm kind of speaking for Brian here at this point, so feel free to correct me, Brian, and the plan that was developed felt that using the talent that we have that's internal in the district was the wisest path to go. Any new interim who would be an outside interim coming in would be heavily reliant on the first month or two or more on the central office staff to come up to speed with the specifics of the senior administrators in particular, the specifics of the context of our schools, and that instead of using that time to bring an interim up to date on short term, the committee's suggestion is that we use the talent that already exists in here to make our member of our senior leadership the interim candidate and move much more quickly to a permanent role. But certainly the state did put some pressure on the city on the schools wanting to have a clear plan on that, and the state was happy with this, and it's I mean that is a real concern that we need to make sure that the agency of ed is on board. It's easy to say, well, let's just push it back 2 weeks. We push it back 2 weeks. We still have to then take it back to the state. The state has to check all the references to make sure that everything's set for an interim superintendent, that all the licensure is there, and that's a lengthy process. So the 2-week process really becomes at least a month or longer before we would have an additional interim in, and that would be the district continuing to drag its heels, not knowing what its short-term leadership strategy is going to be. And I guess I feel that it's incumbent upon me, working in lots of school districts over lots of times and seeing lots of superintendents, leave. It's very common for an internal candidate to be named the interim. I mean, that's we can argue whether or not it's the best or the best path or not, but it's certainly not it's not unusual. I've been part of 3 different times when that's taken place. Commissioner Giannoni.
Having considered the pros and cons, I would like to support Brian's motion to hire Stephanie as the interim superintendent.
To appoint.
To appoint, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Commissioner Curry.
I just wanted to add that, the search process was really a learning curve for us. We, you're right, David, it was our responsibility, and we know none of us really thought of the fact that we needed a chair for the committee, and we all just kind of threw ourselves together and didn't, no one really stepped up to be chair. So the lack of leadership was a learning process. And then I think at the same time, the board was so consumed with so many different issues without a superintendent that, we were trying to hear, or we didn't hear the staff through the cacophony that, staff was saying, wait a minute, you gotta follow a certain process, and we didn't have a chair to kind of connect with that. And fortunately, Brian stepped up and, started bringing leadership and bringing a very good process to the table. By that time, we had new information about the Agency of Education, and that new information brought to light that we needed to do things differently than we had set out to do them. And in fact, there was one day we had 3 very critical conversations. The day, June 18th, the day the Finance Committee meeting was canceled, and by holding that meeting on the agenda to be warned, we actually did create a transparent process where board members who were going to attend a meeting could have come to that meeting anyway and learned what had happened that day. So there was an opportunity where some board members did come to find out what happened, and they found out what happened. And then there were many emails that tried to bring other board members up to speed. But that is, that was kind of a critical moment when things changed. And so, having learned that our outside constituent in the Agency of Education was a player that we hadn't considered, it really meant, and also hearing from staff that they were, really at their wits' end as far as needing the board to kind of create some leadership and hand things back to the staff because we really were way too far in the weeds. We heard the staff say, we just need to have one of us be the leader and let's get moving. We needed to move everything to a different platform where we could focus on other issues and let the staff start doing their job again. So from my perspective, that was, all of it happened in a very compressed time. It was unfortunate. It wasn't what we set out to do. And we tried to do the best we could, given the limitations that we all live with every day in terms of getting an important decision, recommendation to come forward in order to help stabilize the district.
Patrick? I don't know if there's anyone in line, but
Yeah.
I'd like to jump on line.
Okay. Commissioner.
I just wanted to say, especially given the fact that we are coming very close to the end of the summer already, or it feels like it, and that we've lost some time, I think stability is kind of the key here. My daughter has had 4 principals in 5 years at her school, as at elementary school. It was not a stable situation. There was a lot of frustration and a lot of just confusion from parents and from students. And believe it or not, she's also a little concerned that there's no superintendent. I mean, not all kids are paying attention, but the lack of stability is strange and disconcerting, so I can only imagine how the staff feels. So I'm thinking, I really do support the idea of being transparent, but especially when we have the state looking at us and trying to push us forward, and especially if this is not abnormal to a point from within, that I think we really do need to think about that stability for the entire community. Thank you.
Commissioner Turner, did you want to speak?
I guess I'm in the queue, right, Patrick?
Yeah. Commissioner Shumsky, I'm letting everyone speak once before anyone speaks a second time. So yes.
I'm not disagreeing. I seem to preface a lot of my comments like this, disagreeing with the basic premise of what you're saying about the process. But as Commissioner Curry said, it's not necessarily been a pretty process, but it's been a process. And it hasn't not been transparent. In fact, we put out a call for nominations, right away for the public, and try to at least put out a call out there for people to provide their input, give us some names, a little brainstorming beyond what we might know in our own personal circles. And I think that there was some benefit to that, and there were conversations to be able to have from that of the kind of people interested, the kind of people we might want interested, the qualifications to looking through. So it was, like I said, a non-pretty process, but we're finding our way, as we have in the since March, having to deal with a lot of things that, as a volunteer board, we've had to try and find our way. I would be concerned if we were discussing appointing me. I have absolutely no problems supporting the motion to support Stephanie, because we could continue the process, and it raises for me the question of, well, what is the end game? Because at this point, we could do more transparency. We could do more outreach. You could always do more of whatever you're trying to do. You can always improve. God knows I could always improve. But we're talking 2 weeks, 3 weeks. We're trying to get the district moving. We are trying to use Mark's word, and I think it was a good one, addressing the harm that has come to the district, either from whatever parties, ourselves, administration, outside influences. And it's time to start moving and building the district, and we're repairing the bridges and doing the work with staff and with the administration and with the public to regain trust and to build the nature of the district again, and to move forward and to start, as Patrick said once, it would be nice to just sit and spend a meeting talking about lesson plans and where we want to go, and not always the kind of stuff we are talking about. So I agree that some could be gained by going along with the stuff that Scott, Mark, Miriam, and others are talking about. I disagree that it warrants a further delay, and especially because, in my opinion, Stephanie's credentials, her ability, the current and developing relationships she has with staff, with the administration, and with the state, I feel that it's an interim leadership that's in good hands with some very solid support.
in the administration and external to the district as well. I have absolutely no problems doing this. I really disagree that we need to continue what's effectively a state of chaos for what's a matter of degrees of, reward. I think we're making a good choice here.
Commissioner Stoll?
I didn't get to speak a second time yet, and
Yeah, I understand.
Miriam.
You know what, I'm gonna ask, I understand
All right.
that, Brian. Everyone's gonna get their
Okay.
chance. I felt that Miriam had
It
just
wasn't a statement.
had a question, and I'd like to hear from her.
Thank you. I appreciate this conversation. I think it's a good one. And this is a complicated issue for me. And one of the issues is that time moves fast. And it was not too long ago that we were promising the public that there was going to be a lot of change. There was going to be change in how we looked at our finances, change in the culture of the district, change in how the board operated, and that was just a few weeks ago. And I feel still committed to that. I don't feel yet that we are at the point where stability needs to be our goal. I'm nervous, in fact, about stepping into a situation where we may be continuing the practices that we have been in the past. So, although I guess I am worried that having an internal candidate, even a really excellent one, will not assure that we're going to be looking at things in a new way. And I really feel strongly that that's what we promised we would do and what we need to do. So I definitely know, Ben, I listen to you talk, and I understand a lot of what you're saying, and that rings true to me in a lot of ways. Yet I feel that we owe it to the public and to the kids to keep going in the way we're going, and I don't think we're ready yet to stabilize and consolidate. This is a super important year we're going into. From a financial standpoint, we're going to have to make a lot of very steep cuts. If we start looking at special education, which hasn't been looked at in a serious way for a long time, there's going to be lots of changes there. I don't think that we can afford as a district to kind of hang on until we get a new superintendent. So I guess I'll be voting, it's a hard choice, but I will be voting against this motion right now. While I don't think it's ideal, I do think the notion of looking for a couple of more weeks would be good. In one way, that would allow us to see if there are other external or internal candidates to consider, and it would also give Stephanie a chance to let us know how she's going to do things differently. I feel like I haven't heard. I don't know what kinds of thoughts she has. I don't know where she wants to take the district. And I would like to hear that. It may be that she has great ideas, and that would make me feel that I could step back and say, okay, we are moving in the right direction, but I don't know that yet. So that's what I have to say.
So there's been a lot of criticism of the lack of transparency or process. So, to address that, I would like to provide the community with a summary of the process so that no one can say there isn't transparency, because the notion that we've been dragging our feet or not doing anything is false. And I just feel like it's unfair for it to be publicly put on the record that we didn't do anything when we've been busting our asses. I'm sorry, working very hard. So I'm a little crude. I represent the old North End. So sorry, just how it is. So deal with it. So during the I'm sorry if you guys are offended. Okay, so around the time that we became aware that we were going to have to find an interim, Kyle, Liz, and I were asked to begin conversations and discussions about how to begin this process. And this was near the end of April, okay? Ben joined the effort a few days later. Through a series of informal discussions and conversations, we decided to put it out in the press release that we were calling out for nominations to kind of take a temperature read of the community, get some ideas from people, and we were swamped, to be honest, with ideas. I mean, I don't know exactly how many. I don't know if we can say the number of how many nominations we got, but it was we're talking like, a lot. So like 50 maybe, something like that. At that time, Liz needed to step back. She'd been doing a lot of other stuff, and Alan stepped in to help out. We informally reviewed the nominations, reached out to some potential candidates to just say, you've been nominated, is this something you would even do? And we had some people say maybe, yes, and some people say hell no, I'm not coming in there. So, okay, honestly, so we looked at the external candidates and the internal candidates, and we engaged in a solid debate and discussion about inside outside, stability change, what's best for the district right now, what are the pros and cons of each. It was not a flippant decision. There was a lot of thought that went and discussion that went into that process. Then we started, honestly, the mistake we made is we should have talked to Nikki sooner, because then we started talking about job descriptions, interview questions, and all these things. And then we had a meeting here that most of you were at, in which I expressed that I was concerned that there was a lack of leadership or direction to this process. And then people said, well, then why don't you take it over? And I said, I will, as long as no one undermines what I do once I start doing it. The next day, me and Nikki met. And Nikki presented me with the process for a search of this level. And it's huge, even for an interim, for a superintendent. I immediately started calling people that day. That's when I called Scott, saying, this is what we'd be looking at. Trainings, planning, we need to get, if we're gonna do this within a couple of weeks, we need to meet within days. There's a lot of work to do. And I was ready to, guide us through that. But the next day, I was told to stop and that we needed to have a special meeting because there were concerns from the state that this process was not going to move fast enough to ensure stability and the completion of essential work that the superintendent would need to do over the summer. The reality is that even waiting a month and hiring someone in the middle of July or August creates a lag in time where there's essential duties that need to be fulfilled. So when it was presented to us that the state had these concerns, at that time we had a discussion, a quorum of the search committee, and Charlie joined us, and the senior directors, which was Stephanie, Nikki, and Paul. I believe that was the people in attendance. At which time we talked about where we were at, and do we make the unconventional move of engaging in a long, it's short, but it's still long process to continue searching after all this time and after all this discussion, or do we make the decision that it's not the most efficient, wise decision to prolong this any further, and that through the deliberations that the committee has made, are we at a point where we would recommend to the board that we go with the choice of appointing an interim versus creating a search process for an interim? And would it not make more sense to have there be some stability? And would it not be more efficient use of our resources to switch our energy towards the search for the permanent? And at that meeting, it was unanimously decided that that was what the search committee was going to recommend to the board. And so I know we were going in a certain direction, but just because we're going in a certain direction doesn't mean we can't change course. Sometimes the direction you're going in is going to take you off a cliff. So as much as I was ready to go with this process, and I was willing to put in all that extra work, when we had that meeting, I changed my mind. And I realized it would make more sense to take this energy and put it into the permanent search and have things be stable for a little while. There has been a lot of change. Stephanie Seguino had said, when we were looking at cuts, that too much of cuts can shock a system. Well, I'm a social worker, and I can tell you that too much socially will shock a system. And when you have an organization and you have too much change in the organization at once, that can create major ripples that can destabilize and undermine the work of the organization. So where I sit now, I think the wisest decision and the most efficient decision, the most accountable decision, would be to move forward with an interim. And that's why I brought the motion, and I didn't do this lightly. I talked with every single one of you on the phone, right, about this. And I spoke with Stephanie and Nikki about this. So I bring this motion to the table. That's the process we had. April, you had sent me, you're April, right? You had sent me an email and I didn't respond because I didn't feel comfortable in advance. But now you know what you asked, which was what was the process. Everyone knows there's transparency. If people have criticisms, I'm open to hearing it. But we're human and we're doing the best we can in a crisis. So where we're at, me and Nikki have already met to start planning the permanent search because we're not wasting time and we're not dragging our feet. But we were told to chill until this was, well, we weren't told to chill. We were told people were told to not answer the surveys and not reach out and not take the steps Nikki and I were asking people to do until this was put to rest. If we can make this decision tonight and move forward, Nikki and I are ready to engage you in moving forward with this process. So I'm sorry to give you a speech. That's what I was avoiding at the beginning. But after some of the criticism, I felt like it is important, if people want the micro details, that I put it out there once. It's been videotaped. Okay, it's been documented. It's out there. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Brian. Commissioner Shumsky.
I just want to say I disagree with you, Brian, that we are not in a crisis. We are not in a crisis. Stephanie Phillips is our acting superintendent. If we are going to be in a crisis with her as an acting superintendent, I have no idea how putting the name interim somehow takes us out of this crisis. She's the leader of the ship today. Nothing's going to change for the next 3 weeks. She'll be the leader of the ship. And then possibly after that, she'll continue to be the leader of the ship. I want to thank Miriam for raising the issue, which is this board has the interim search committee. I still have heard nothing from the interim search committee that the questions, the vision that they talked to Stephanie about. This board hasn't had a chance to have Stephanie come, and she's not prepared, so I'm not asking her to do it now, but to come to us and say, this is what I want to do with my interim position. It's a very good point, is that to hear her vision. This is the leader of our organization. Is that something that we should look at for a more permanent position than simply an acting position? Brian, when you said that the Agency of Education felt our plan didn't move fast enough, I believe that's inaccurate. At no point did we ever discuss you becoming the chair of the committee, setting up this 3-week process, the process you talked to Nikki about. That was never what was discussed with the AOE. The AOE had concerns that we were going to have no superintendent as of July 1st. They just wanted to know what was going on. So the plan that was put forward was not necessarily that plan. So they didn't have a concern with the path that was going down. They've never heard that. So we could have gone to them and said, this is our path. And I'm a big believer of, the Agency of Education is doing their job. They should be concerned about every student in this state. And all they did is they wanted to get answers from us, which they have every right to. And we did have a plan. We should have stuck with that plan. It was a good plan. And now, Brian, you say that the process is not normal. But the day after you were appointed chair, you did speak with Nikki, and you talked about this training like you just mentioned, I mentioned. At no point did you say to me, Nikki goes, why on earth are you doing this? Why would you do training? This is so abnormal. So let's be honest. This might not be usual or what's done every time, but it's not out of the realm of normalcy. In fact, one of the things, I just Googled it and what came up on the first page, Buffalo, New York is doing, they don't call it an acting superintendent, they named an interim superintendent for a couple weeks, and they say they're taking applications and they're going to do interviews, and in a couple weeks they're going to name an interim superintendent. So I know, Kat, you said well, if this isn't normal, but it's like Buffalo, New York is doing exactly what I'm proposing. So I'm not saying every district in the country is doing this, but if you want to say that what we're doing or what I'm proposing is somehow abnormal, it's not. Buffalo, New York's doing it. I'm sure other districts are as well. Doesn't mean every district does it this way, but let's not say that we can't go down this 3-week path because we'd be the only district doing it.
Nikki?
I guess what I think has been missing in this conversation is the fact that for approximately 6 weeks, you've really been without a superintendent. And Stephanie, as well as myself and Paul, have stepped up and tried to keep things running as smoothly as possible given the circumstances. And it seems that should say a lot, because you know what? We got a lot to do. Mm-hmm. We don't really need this, to be honest. We really don't. But we want to do what's right for the district. And I'll say for myself, I take personal offense to suggest that because I'm internal, because I work for the district, that I am somehow a problem and just going to continue what exists. I know I've been here for 18 months and been doing everything I could do to do everything differently. So to presume that somehow I'm here to do things the same, you got me wrong at least. And I could say the same for Stephanie. We have spent the last several weeks doing things that are not our job. And you say you don't have a crisis? Yes, you do. We've been doing somebody else's job, unpaid, and been doing it happily because we're doing it for the district. We're doing it for the kids. So I'm not here to try to convince you. I know what we've been doing. I know we've been holding the boat afloat. And so what I'm saying to you is you can keep searching all you want. You will not find anybody else in this district who knows what's going on, who has been in this building with all the chaos. We have lost, 7 people since January. We've got administrators doing double, triple duty, just trying to keep the boat afloat. And if you think going to find someone else and bring them in, whoever it is, they're not going to know anything close to what we know. Just this week alone, just trying to get the teachers hired that we couldn't get hired because it took so long for us to get there. It takes us all day. Each one of us are working, and I kid you not, do not think I'm kidding, 7 days a week we have been working. And so my point to you is, it's your decision, but yes, you are in a crisis, because we're saying to you, we're doing it as a team. And Mark, to answer your question, Stephanie is not alone. She has Paul and I. We have been putting a lot of work in. Paul's been putting a lot of work in around the business office. I've been putting a lot of work in the stuff that usually Jeannie would do around hiring, meeting with every single final candidate. Stephanie's been dealing with all the other issues along with the board. So there's been a lot of work. But what I also want to tell you is that you want transparency. Here's the process. The bottom line is we need to just get moving, number one. And a permanent superintendent is the way to go. And the reason it's the way to go is we can begin that process. We began that by sending out a survey to the board just to see what it is that the board wants. These are things that would have happened had you candidly come to us in the beginning and engaged us, and you did not, because apparently you didn't trust that we know what we're doing. The fact is, we have suggested to you to answer the survey. Tell us what it is you're looking for in a superintendent. We could have been well beyond this at this point. We've asked you for nominations so that we can make sure we get a good, solid, and we've provided you with that. Every single one of you have gotten an email that provided you with what that process would look like. We talked about having a search firm to at least help us with the national search. We've talked about making sure that we have input sessions throughout the city, numerous input sessions for the public. We've talked about making sure that there's opportunities for surveys for those who can't make those input sessions. There'll be surveys. And we were very clear that we had to start this in September, because doing this in the middle of the summer, there's nobody here. The teachers are gone. Most people are gone. So we wanted this to be preparation time this next month to prepare for the big push. So there's plenty of transparency in that process. There's going to be a website, there'll be email access, there'll be every kind of transparency that you can possibly have. And that's something the district hasn't had in the past. So we've got a really great process to get you there. So I guess I will end by saying, the reality is, you've been looking for an interim for some time. You haven't found one. So the point is, it's time to look for a permanent, because that's what we really need. There's been enough losses, there's been enough slash and burn. It's time to start developing, growing, rebuilding our district. That's what I would like to see, and that's why I'm doing this. So, it's up to you.
I'd like to pick up on one thing you said there at the very end, Nikki, just to provide, this is just contextual. We kind of did a little informal cluster analysis of the different names that had been brought forth to us, and they really fell into 4 different categories, 4 different clusters. First were internal candidates. A second were largely retired superintendents. The third would have been within state. The third would have been retired superintendents from out of state. The fourth would have been folks who have some sort of public management but outside of schools. And that's really every single person that came forward fell roughly into one of those categories. Putting internal candidates aside, all 3 of those other ones presented major obstacles, and I think that that's important for us to understand. If we went back, these obstacles are going to become apparent again. A retired superintendent from in-state is going to be in a spot where they're going to have to pull out of the retirement system. Effectively, they're going to be making $60,000 more a year than to work 70, 80-hour weeks than they would be to have no responsibilities. They'd have to pull out of the retirement system. Working with this third cluster, retired superintendents from out of state, the learning curve is going to be steeper for understanding the specific context of Burlington, and potentially some problems with licensure too. And it's that issue with licensure that brought this forward. If you can imagine, I don't know, a former director of the Howard Center. I'm just pulling one out. That was not a person who put his name forward or her name forward. I make that clear. But someone that has experience in kind of as a public executive, but not necessarily in education. And getting licensure in that situation is going to be a really major complication. So out of the 4 clusters, and I don't mean this to sound like, well, the only choice you really had was internal. The expeditious choice, and in terms of kind of some of the legal loopholes and practical loophole issues, was certainly an internal candidate as well. Commissioner Porter.
Thank you. Brian, I was the first one to mention transparency, and unfortunately I think that went too far, because it wasn't meant to make anybody think that there was anything being hidden at all. There was never even the implication of it. So I apologize if that was taken that way. And stop yelling at everybody, will you? So.
I'm Sicilian, that's how we talk.
That's how you pitch the older Sicilians.
What I would like the opportunity to do is going down the thought that Miriam had of, we should accept the fact that there's a possibility, anecdotally we can assume that there's a possibility that this position is going to be lengthy. All right? And in doing so, I think we have an obligation to try our best to deliver what people want on the new superintendent, on the interim superintendent. And that's change. And it may be here. It may be her. I'm not saying it's not. I haven't had that opportunity to put myself in a happy place on that one. Okay? Because why would we want anything less from the interim than we would a lengthy interim that could be an interim for longer than many of us are on the board, than what we asked for in a permanent position. It very well could be her. Stephanie, you may not have been able to say all the things you wanted to say in the past for different reasons. You may have not have been able to implicate all the to drive all the change that you wanted to drive because you weren't in the power to do that. We're talking about putting you in that power, and obviously responsibility, and you know that. All I want is that opportunity, simply to see if she's the choice for the district based on over half of us being replaced in the last year, which is driving all the change and saying, okay, Stephanie, how do you feel about the financial side of things? How do you think we should drive things? How do you feel about the curriculum side of things? Where should we be spending our money? Where should we not be spending our money? Where do we make our priorities, and so on and so on and so on. I just want that opportunity simply to run that gambit and make sure that she's what we were all put in place to deliver. Thank you.
Commissioner Metzen?
Haven't been party to all the conversations with the state or anything, and things did go a little differently than where I thought they were at that point. But I did express to Brian, though, that, I can't do all the work of the board. I can't be involved in absolutely everything. I do have to trust the work of other board members. And my understanding of what came back and why the changes had occurred, as I told Brian, I said, unless I hear something really different at this meeting from what I've heard over the time about where the changes came from, I would be in support of this, and that's still where I am as I am now. I've been involved in one other case away from this in a business that we had. It was actually an elected board. It was not an appointed board, where we had to come up with an interim. We actually fired someone immediately, had to come up with an interim. That interim was literally appointed by the chair, and the chair brought that to the board. We had an elected constituency at that time. That is something that can happen. And as I've heard all these conversations about where do we put our energy, we have a finite amount of energy, and I want to put my energy into the permanent search. And I actually think that, in some ways, I actually think that we as I've been looking at this, I feel like this is a decision I wish I could have, thought of 2 months ago and, had, suggested that we maybe just make that appointment, quickly. I really, from a number of things, background, thinking about what I've heard from the state and things like that, I feel like this maybe was something I wish we could have, made this statement, as soon as we knew we needed to, and said this is where we were going to go. I think we could have been here already, and so I am actually very strongly in support of this because of trusting the work that the rest of the board has done, where I want to put my energy going forward, and with the candidate I think we have in front of us.
Any further comment? Commissioner Kerr?
Nikki and Stephanie and Paul, who's not here, you guys, we all know you're doing a good job. We all know you guys are doing work. I don't mean to ever imply you are not, okay? I appreciate everything you guys do because you are holding this place together in the office. I understand that, all right? Don't think that this is any attack on you. And thank you, Brian, for explaining the process. It was more clear. I don't know if I agree with it, but it was definitely more clear. I don't know why we stopped. That didn't make sense to me. I don't know who said stop. That didn't make sense to me, but thank you, okay, for explaining it. Now it's at least the process is clear. Whether or not I agree with it or not, that's still different, okay?
Commissioner Clayman?
I'm just wondering what kind of cost the search for an interim is going to, what we're going to have to, aside from cost, personal cost of time, expenditures, is there a financial cost?
You're talking about for interim or permanent?
For interim. What happens in this process? Is it more, and is it, I'm also concerned about the length of time. It sounds like it's not just 3 weeks.
So, I know people keep saying 3 weeks. I would defer to Nikki as the expert, but from what I've learned so far from Nikki, this is not going to take 3 weeks. Nikki, what do you think?
It won't take 3 weeks. It'll take you more than 3 weeks. Even for interim, it would take you more than 3 weeks. And the reason is, number one, you need to have a committee. The board really shouldn't be the committee. There should be board members on the committee, but the board can't be the committee. So you gotta have a committee. It's summer. People are on vacation. In fact, I'll be on vacation one of those weeks. So it's just not gonna happen because it will just take too long. In addition, if we're going to do the process like we want the permanent, it really won't take 3 weeks because I think only person on this board who has been trained in the anti-bias training for hiring is Alan. So any members of this hiring committee would have to have that same training that we require every single other person on a hiring committee in this district to have. Am I supposed to just, one, I don't think everybody, trying to put everybody's schedule together and then me put this training together doesn't really, and then you gotta, frankly, we gotta understand what you want. That was the purpose of the survey. Even for an interim, I need to know, as the facilitator of this process, I need to know what does this board want. I got 14 people with 14 different ideas. So that takes more than 3 weeks to figure out. So I think you're kidding yourself if you think you're gonna you will be able to search for an interim. So how much will it cost you? I have no idea. And the bottom line is that right now, you shouldn't be spending money on an interim. You should be spending it on the permanent, is my point of view.
Any further comment? Right, the motion is on the table to appoint Stephanie Phillips as the interim superintendent. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed?
You're either calling for voice or hands.
Yeah, I'm gonna need to see, I'd like to do a hand vote here. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All those opposed? The motion passes, 6-4. Congratulations, Stephanie, and thank you. And congratulations and thank you to Stephanie, to Nikki, to Paul, who's on vacation right now, for congratulations for taking on greater responsibilities, and thank you for those greater responsibilities. And Brian, thank you for stepping up and leading this committee, and for the work that you now get to do going forward in leading it toward a permanent search.
Can I just say something quick about that?
Please do.
I don't know if it's out of line. But
no, I think something about the permanent.
I know
search
everyone didn't
process.
agree on this, but I'm hoping that moving forward, we can all pull together and put our energy into a good search for a permanent, because, you know, I'm just hoping people, you know, we can all pull together now and prevent any problems in that search, because we're starting from the beginning the right way. So, thanks.
And to add to that, Brian, we had a discussion sitting in this room the night that you became the chair of this committee, Brian, that we said we may not all agree with what the final decision is, but when the final decision is made, those who are in here committed to getting behind it and supporting it. So I hope that people keep their word on that one. Board goals, Liz?
So actually, could we have a point of order?
Sure.
Could you clarify the vote, please, since there's 11 board members?
I typically do not vote as the chair on anything.
Okay.
So it's 6 to 4.
6 to 4.
So board goals, this item is kind of following up on the retreat we had June 5th, and also on the policy committee met and discussed the fact that we are overseeing the superintendent evaluation this year, and in order to do that, based on our policy, the board still needs to establish its goals for the year. So this is also, you know, by way of creating a two-way street with Stephanie. We need to give her guidance on what our goals and priorities are, and we have yet to do that. So we did talk about having a second kind of retreat in order to complete the work. Originally, we had talked about doing that for the diversity and equity training that we need to have. But after corresponding with Nikki, it became clear that it would be very difficult to arrange that for the summer for a 4-hour training. Both Nikki and DeVerne feel that, you know, it's really important that we plan for that well, and I agree. And I think the Diversity and Equity Committee was hoping that we could create a time when there would be a longer set of, a longer day that we could do that and do it right, and give our consultants a heads up and have a better plan. So instead, the planning committee talked about having another 4-hour meeting. And so I'll be doodling everyone or asking everybody for a date when we do set up our goals. I want to thank everybody who has worked on the work plan. I'll be collecting that before the next 4-hour retreat meeting. And I know some committees are still trying to develop it and get the consensus of their committee behind those work plans. So that's also starting to come together. But I just want to give everybody a heads up to please make time for another 4-hour meeting. Hopefully we can get the same spot if that was comfortable for everybody. I'll be in touch.
And are we trying to shoot for this month?
Yes.
Superintendent's report, year-end contracts. There were several contracts that were resolved or in the process of being resolved. I don't know if Nikki can speak to those.
The office personnel contract is almost done. The final document has gone to them. There's some typos, things that are being worked out, and I think that in the next week or so we should have that resolved. The para contract, there is still some negotiations over money. Largely, right now there's some concerns with regard to that, yes.
As far as we're getting status on negotiations, is there anything in this that
No.
should be, okay,
No.
executive session, okay.
So there's still some discussion there. Dylan's on vacation for the last 2 weeks. I think he's out next week as well. Sarah Jane and he were working on that. Sarah Jane, I don't know, no longer working for the district now. So we are now using Colin McNeil to sort of finish that off for us. And then the bar contract, I believe a tentative agreement went out, and I haven't gotten confirmation as to whether it has been ratified. And once it's ratified, it just needs to come before this board. So all those contracts are pretty much very close. The one that's not as close at the moment is the paras, and that's mostly because of a delay because of vacations, and that contract doesn't expire till the end of July, I believe. So it's not beyond its expiration date. Yes.
Just a question of clarification. So all three of those come to the board to ratify separately? Each of
Well,
those
they
contracts we ratify, or how does that work?
Well, yeah, they first go to the organization
Yeah.
to ratify, and if they agree to it, then it comes to the board for you to agree, because you're the other party in the agreement, so.
So we would vote on each one of them separately, and we would get to see the full contracts before
You can
we
see the
voted?
full contracts. Typically, what we do is we provide a summary of the changes, because they're fairly lengthy contracts. I mean, you're welcome to read the entire contract, but we do provide a summary so you can know what the changes are in order to, it makes it a quicker read for you.
Okay, and so would we expect, hopefully all these would be done by the next board meeting, like in August? Is that the
The
hope?
hope was they would be done today, but there's just too much going on right now, and it's summer, and it just makes it very hard to get people together, but yes.
I'm going to back up a minute, and there's something that Liz and I talked with earlier today about adding to the board report. And I'm going to be slightly edit this just to protect the identity of the individual, but we received as a board, and I just thought this was something that was worth sharing with the larger community. We received a letter from an exchange student who just spent a year in BHS, and I think it is the sort of stuff that we need to say hear a little bit more and share a little bit more. And so I'm going to read from this, and I'm kind of editing as I go. So that's I go. All right. This goes out to everyone at this fantastic high school. I'm so grateful that I got to spend my exchange year at such a wonderful place. This school and this year taught me a lot. And I'm so grateful that everyone opened their hearts to me and gave me the chance to experience American culture. I came to America 11 months ago, not knowing anybody or anything. I was a stranger to the city. Now when I look back, I was a completely different person. In fact, I started to read my diary from the beginning. I'm not even sure that I'm the same person. I remember my first days of school so clearly, but after a while, BHS became my home. So did Burlington. I made so many fantastic friends. I met people from all over the world. People will always be in my heart. I got to cheer for my school at football games. I got to be a part of different teams and clubs. I got to ride the yellow school bus. I got to stand on stage. I got to try sports I didn't even know that existed. I was a part of BHS. Sometimes I wish I could bring just a tenth of your school spirit to my school. People love to go to school here, so did I. I felt like BHS is more of a family than a school. The family of seahorses. Every single teacher cared about my personal feelings. I never had such good relationships with my teacher in my whole life. BHS, you can be proud of yourself. BHS has taught me that school is about more than studying. It's about making memories with friends, about having fun. I'm so glad and proud that I was able to be a seahorse for 1 year. I want to thank especially Miss Patty, and I believe that's Patty Wesley. I knew that there was always a person I can trust and that is supporting me. Thank you so much for that. I also want to thank my coaches. They took their time to teach me completely new sports. They were really patient with me. I got to be part of teams who accepted me the way I am. Nobody tried to change me. I loved to participate on practices and games and races. I had such great times. Thank you, BHS, for giving me the opportunity to experience American culture, to be a part of an amazing high school. BHS changed me for better. It gave me a better understanding of life, and there are no words that could explain how much I'll miss this place and those people. BHS will always be a home for me, and I'm positive that I'll come back here as soon as possible. BHS, you will always be in my heart. You are a part of you are a part of myself. Thanks for everything. So, thought that was worth sharing. Now back to our agenda. Update on search for permanent finance director. I don't know if Nikki would be the point. Miriam, I don't know if you've had.
Nikki would be.
Okay.
There's a couple of problems with, I shouldn't call it problems, I should say issues. One is I've been discussing with persons to see who we can get on the committee. And the first is the board hasn't decided if there's anyone who's going to sit on that committee. I know Stephanie Seguino and Miriam, right? So you would have to decide if you wanted to be on that committee. I always remind people before they sit on committees that typically then you don't vote at the board level. So if you want to vote at the board level, I wouldn't encourage you to be on the committee. So there's several people. The big problem right now, again, is that people are on vacation. So last week was really a big vacation week. So there weren't many people who were responding in terms of that, getting that committee together. So pretty much the process will be very similar to what we're doing with the superintendent, not on the same scale, obviously. And the goal would be to fill that position fairly quickly. But the real issue is going to be, again, getting the people on the committee trained to do the anti-bias training for hiring. So yes, are you pointing at me?
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
A couple questions. I just want a clarification. We are working with School Board Association,
Yes,
right,
we are.
on this one. Second thing was we did get from the School Board Association, was that just a finance committee, some questions about,
Right, that was for the board, yes.
that,
and
yeah,
then go to Bob.
and have we gotten good responses? Has the board responded to that and given the input?
He has not indicated, because it's going directly to him, I don't see.
Okay, right.
He has not indicated that there's been any problem with him
Okay,
getting
good.
that information, but if you haven't done it, please do so. He and I have been in contact. Right now, the issue is the actual contract that they sent to us. Unfortunately, the contract they sent to us was for a superintendent search, not for a business
Right, they
administrator
forgot
search.
that they sent the form, yeah.
Yeah, so, I talked to Bob about us fixing that little problem
Yeah.
with the contract, and so I'm staying in touch. He says he's ready, so we just really need to get our committee, together. I would add, however, that I will be asking Bob, to do some additional advertising, in other places other than School Spring and some of the other sources he's used. We would like to see him do an additional advertising in some other with some other organizations, such as the accountants. There's accountants of color, Latino, accountants, making sure that we stay true to our goals of diversity even in this position. So we'll be asking him to do some additional advertising, but that shouldn't delay things, since we still will be working with the committee.
Nikki, just so everybody knows, especially the board members, what's the time commitment when you want to be on this hiring committee? What is a board member's time commitment to being on the committee? I mean, are we meeting at 2 o'clock in the afternoon? We meeting at noon? We meeting at 7 o'clock in the morning? What's the deal?
Well,
because I don't really know.
Right. Well, that's usually the issue. Once you send out feelers to people to see who might be interested, and it's really a matter of those people who say they're interested, and you set out a timeline, and then they say, okay, I can meet. What we typically try to do with those committees is try to have them in the afternoon, I should say early evening, because people do work, and we want to make sure we can get people in. We try to do it during the week, because obviously people don't want to spend their weekends doing it. Depending upon how many candidates that we have, and Bob is doing a bit of the work. I guess he's helping to develop the questions for you guys and things like that, so you really wouldn't have to do that, but you have to do a little bit. You'll have to make some decisions. So it's going to be several meetings at the very least. You're going to have the training. That's one. I can do the training in about 2 to 2.5 hours for that. You'll also have your charge meeting, where we go over the details, confidentiality, all those things that you need to know about. So you go. So that's another meeting, which could be an hour, hour and a half. Probably more like an hour and a half, to be honest. And then you'll start reviewing applications. The beginning, depending on how many applications you get. That's time. And then obviously the interviews to narrow down who your candidates are. And then in the end, once the board makes a decision, we always encourage people who were on the committee to come to the final debriefing meeting, because we really need to know what worked with the process and what didn't work, and things that we can do better. And so I know it's sort of annoying after the fact, but it really helps us out.
So people aren't in. So if anybody wants to be on this, people choose to be on this committee, public or the board, or teachers or whatever.
Right.
So we're talking mostly after work stuff.
Right.
But there's a time commitment with everything.
Right. It is definitely a time commitment. And the one thing I do like to let people know is that if you're going to be on the committee, we really insist that you be at virtually every meeting. I mean, we recognize somebody gets sick, your kid gets sick, things like that, but it really harms the process if people are missing and then show up later and they have questions. And particularly once we get to the interviews, if you cannot make a set of interviews, you really shouldn't be, because you need to see every candidate.
I agree. Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Status on key year-end financial reports due to the state. There are several key reports that have to be done over the summer.
I have an update from Miranda. So there is, on July 15th, Miranda has a grants report due. It's a fourth quarter report, so she indicated that it's a relatively small report that's due since it is just a quarterly report. It's not her final grants report of the year that actually will come due at the end of September. So that's a July 15th timeline for a fourth quarter grants report. And then 2 additional reports coming due in August that she gave me. One is the SEER report, Special Education Expenditure Report, which is due on August 1st. As well, she also gave me a Medicaid report that is due on August 15th. And so an update, she said that she is working on pulling together all the information for those reports. And we also have George Cormier, who is helping Miranda. He's a retired Vermont business manager, so he's been through several times the process of filing these reports. And so he's giving Miranda some guidance since it's her first time with these Vermont-specific reports. And so she feels like things are on track at this point and that she has the support she needs to make those timelines.
I think the other thing that we've talked about too is protecting her, giving her the space to make sure that she can do those and the support so that those can be done.
Absolutely.
And one more thing also, she hired an accountant, right? So they have an accountant in who's also helping Miranda, so she has additional support there.
Right, and I believe the accountant is trying to help her with the process of closing out FY14.
And the work that she would be doing if she's not doing this, so that's under control.
Commissioner Gino.
Could we clearly say what personnel changes there have been that are working on the finances? So you just mentioned an accountant, you mentioned George Cormier. So exactly who's been brought on board? Because I get questioned about this a lot. So I need a good idea of what's happening.
Sure.
You want me to take that?
Sure, Miriam.
Yeah, so to get these reports done, this is really critical. And so generally that would have been the Director of Finance that would have done that. So David would have done those reports, but since we don't have a Director of Finance and are now searching for one, Miranda has stepped up and she's going to do these reports. So she's fully qualified to do them, she just hasn't done them before. So George Cormier is coming in to be a bit of a mentor for her. He's not going to actually do the reports, but he's going to make sure that, you know, sort of answer questions, be there for her, and that's a consulting kind of relationship as needed. Then she also brought in the accountant because she's spending time on this, she needed someone else to do the accounting work, the closing the books at the end, as Stephanie was saying. So that's going to be done by this accountant. I don't know his qualifications, but I assume he's good, and he's being brought in on a temporary basis. The funds for all of this were already in. There's no new funds needed for these positions. So then there's one additional finance person that I will talk about a little bit in the finance report, but can just mention here. So we've also brought in a consultant to the board. So this is Ed Gomo. He is reporting to the board, and he's going to be working on some of the process changes. He's going to be doing mapping out our current processes, comparing them to best practices, determining where we can do better, not necessarily implementing things, but coming in and being that eye for us. So those are the 3 new people in the finance department.
What's the name of the accountant?
I don't know his name, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure we can find that for you, but he's not something that the finance committee has dealt with it all. This was from the staff a request, and it made sense, and they hired him pretty quickly, right, Nikki?
Yeah.
I'm sure, and I've seen him around the office. So.
Okay, thank you.
Consent agenda. We have a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Okay.
Commissioner Stoll, second. Commissioner Mattson. All in favor of the consent agenda as published on board docs, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Consent agenda passes. Committee reports. ITC has,
One clarification, so did we just approve all the minutes also in doing the
minutes
consent
are
agenda?
part of the consent agenda.
Okay, excellent, thank
Yeah.
you.
Did you want to speak to that, as you are the ITC committee for a very short time? We have Commissioner Porter has agreed to join ITC, and Commissioner Mattson is going to be joining ITC as well. But since you've been part of those discussions, if you would.
Well, it's pretty simple. The ITC has we moved forward on the Hunt roof. The bonding is moving forward. If you drive through Hunt's parking lot, the dumpsters and the trucks are there. They're going to do some of the stuff after school starts for cost savings. So it came in under budget. They're also doing a couple of window replacements in the gymnasium to make it more energy efficient at the same time as part of the program, and that came in under budget as well. $1.1 million versus 1.3 we budgeted for it. So even with our contingency, we should still come in well under budget. But I don't know any updates on that any more than that, because we didn't have a meeting this month. Also, Paul says he's on track for staying under budget on the one-to-one stuff. He's been able to keep that down and on budget and on track. So at this point, that seems to be good. We do have an opening. Joel has, which is on the consent agenda, has left the district, who was Mark's administrator for that program, for the property services. I don't know what's going on with that yet. I'm hoping to find out. Being the lone member of the ITC at this point, I don't really know what's really going on. So as soon as I know more, I'll be more than happy to share it.
And that'll be rectified here tonight too. Can I ask a question of you, Nikki? I saw in School Spring that there was something that was posted. I think it was listed as assistant property services manager.
Yeah, that's
okay.
what it's listed.
As opposed to so it would be Mark would be made the
director.
The director. This would be an assistant, which is a change from the former.
Right.
Okay. I just wanted that was my guess. I just wanted to get that clarification. Diversity and equity.
I had a quick question. What would be the anticipated next date for ITC?
We had set it up for the Tuesday before this August meeting.
Yeah.
At 5 o'clock.
Okay.
Our August meeting at 5 o'clock, whatever Tuesday that is.
It's the second Tuesday.
Yeah.
At 5. Great. Okay.
Yeah, and we usually meet wherever this is.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Diversity and equity. We've had Stephanie is not here, and Meredith is not here.
We didn't meet.
We're meeting.
June.
We're meeting next Thursday, right?
Next meeting is July.
Is it the 15th or 17th?
Wednesday.
I thought that Stephanie sent an email saying the 17th.
She asked to move to the 16th from the 15th, which the meeting's usually on Tuesday.
Summer, yeah, she did say the 16th.
Summer schedules are confusing.
7.
So there,
I can't do this.
there is a I was gonna schedule a finance meeting that's a Wednesday, right? At 7, so if anyone's on both of them.
Yeah, I won't be able to make it at 7 on Wednesday. Sorry.
So the committees
meet with me
get
so I
together
can get
and
some
let's
data.
make sure that if you're going to be moving your committee meeting from its regularly scheduled time, make sure that you're coordinating with all of the chairs so that we don't have duplication.
Right, this is not a regular, this is an extra one, and the
I
finance
understand,
committee's been like meeting Wednesdays
I
at
know,
7
I know.
forever, so.
No, I hear you. Kyle's not here for curriculum committee. Brian, is there anything that you can update? Curriculum?
to remember our last meeting. Stephanie?
I see one from the 24th.
I'm trying to remember. I can't even remember it right now.
Okay, that's fine.
I wasn't prepared to give.
No,
that
that's fine. We have several people out right now, and I understand the turnover.
The minutes are fairly extensive from that meeting too. So.
But there's no business you need to bring. In general, for curricular committee reports, as we haven't gotten into our regular committee meeting structure because of all of the issues that we've had to deal with. In general, for a committee report, if you're just telling us what happened in your meeting, you don't need to do that. We have the minutes in order to see that. As if there's something particular that you need to draw our attention to, or if there's a motion that originated that we need to be moving, but we don't need a blow by blow.
While you were talking, I was able to access my memory, and I do. What I would say is, I mean, if there's detailed minutes, people should read them. But I remember us having a really in-depth discussion. I mean, Scott was there too, so we had a really in-depth discussion about the issue of how do we assess reading skills. We talked. I mean, I can share a highlight if that's cool. You know, so it gives like an example is that we talked about how there's going to be a new volunteer program with kindergartners where community members come in and read to kindergartners, and Stephanie shared with us how there's evidence showing how this helps. The more kids are read to, how it helps them learn to read. So we talked about how this is a pilot project, but if it goes well, it might extend to other schools. What is it, Flynn?
Smith, my bad.
But close, right? Close to the same neighborhood, I think, right? So so is it?
Yes.
Okay.
Close enough.
But that was a highlight for me of the meeting, was that we talked about this program where community members were going to be volunteering to read to kindergartners, and we just spent a lot of time talking about the issue of how to help increase reading proficiency by 3rd grade.
Thank you. Finance Committee.
Okay, I was going to talk about two things. One was Ed Gomo, who I just spoke about briefly, so just everyone should know that we do have this financial advisor on board, and he'll be reporting to the Finance Committee about what he finds, and I'll bring back interesting tidbits. The other thing is, if people could look, I have a motion, and I'd just like to start by making the motion. It's under motion to approve line of credit. Then it says blank 45. I don't know why it says blank. It shouldn't say blank. It's not blank. But if you go ahead and hit that, you'll see the resolution relating to authorization to contract for banking services. And if anyone doesn't have a computer and wants a copy, I believe, Stephanie, you have some hard copies, right? Mm-hmm. So I want to start by saying there's a couple of typos here. Some of them are a little bit funny. So, hi, Miranda. So I apologize for a couple of the typos. We put this on today, and we'll clean these up. But nothing that's substantive. So if you haven't had time to look at this before, you might want to take a moment to look at it. What this
Miriam,
yes.
Where is it again? I'm sorry, I'm trying to locate
so you
it.
go to board docs.
Yeah, I'm there. No.
Okay, motion to approve line of credit, hit that, and then you'll see on your right, under agenda item details, blank 45.
We didn't get a second.
Oh.
Second.
Oh, okay, I'm way down here.
Commissioner
I'm
Shumsky.
Got it. Sorry, thank you, Mary. You want to speak to the motion?
Sorry.
It's actually a resolution.
All right, I'm sorry, so do you have it, David?
Thank you, yes. I
right.
just couldn't, it was so far down underneath it. There were so many
no.
minutes listed.
No problem. So let me just give you a bit of background about this. I'll keep it brief because I think most people are aware of this background, but I can answer questions if people have them. So at the request of the Agency of Education, the district and city finances have been separated. This is a long-standing request from the Agency of Education, and we worked on it quite a bit, the Finance Committee and administration and city folks this month, and we did separate the finances. What that means is that our monies no longer go through the city's sweep account. So there used to be one account where city and school funds would sit in the same account, and then the city would dole out the funds. So that worked. It's been working for us for a long time, but it actually is something that sets us apart from other school districts. And the Agency of Education has asked us not to do that and asked us to separate those by July 1st, so we did. So going forward, what happens is that our funds, which is the bulk of our funds, are tax revenues, which we get a couple times a year from the state, They will now come to the city as they always did, but instead of the city putting them into a sweep account and mixing them, they'll put them into our own dedicated account. They have, I think by statute, 20 days to do that. So this is a new process for us. It is not new for other school districts. This is how every other school district in the state does this. So we're just getting on parity with other school districts by doing this. What this means, though, is, and the city, everyone feels this is a good idea. The Agency of Education feels it's a good idea. We feel it's a good idea. The city feels it's a good idea. It's cleaner. It's more transparent. In theory, it might give us some more control and access to our funds, so it's a good thing. But because it changes the system, and Miranda, feel free to jump in if I say anything wrong here. Because it changes the system, what it means is that we no longer have the sweep account to sort of cover us if we get low on cash. So in the past, if we were a little bit low on cash, the sweep account, the city funds, would come in and support us until our next tax revenue came in. Likewise, if the city ever got low on cash, they could use our funds. So that is no longer a process that's viable. That's not going to happen. So what that means is that when we get low on cash, we've got to find another place to get that cash. So what all school districts in the state do is they generally have a line of credit with a bank. So this is a very standard thing that districts do. We just haven't done it before because we haven't needed to. So now we need to do it. So this last month, the board and the district and the city have also, actually the board and the district mostly, have been working with banks to set up, to try and get the ball rolling so we can get some sort of line of credit. The way the line of credit works is they loan us based on our grant anticipation revenues. So it's not like we're pledging our district buildings. We're pledging the money that's going to come in, and it's a pretty sure bet for the banks. So right now, so what we did is what all school districts do. We put out an RFP to 4 banks, and we've got that going right now, and we're waiting to see which of the banks wants to work with us on this. All of them could come through, some of them could come through, none of them could come through. But one thing that we do know is that even a best case scenario, it's probable that they won't come through as fast as we'd like them to. Because when we look at our cash flows, the reason district cash flows go low sometimes and high other times has to do with when the tax monies come in from the state versus how we spend them. So the first, I spoke with David Larkham about this, and he said it happens about 4 times a year. In most districts, and that it should happen for us in July. So Miranda has looked very carefully so we could get a real more specifics about it, and right now we're estimating it will happen about July 19th, and that we will need a cash infusion from July 19th until 2 things happen. Either the tax revenue comes in or the banks agree to loan to us. So it could be for as much as maybe 4 weeks, 5 weeks, or it could be a short amount that we will need some sort of funding. So this brings me to the second part of the equation. Where do you get that funding? Well, the best way to get it, the easiest way, is from the city. Again, this is a standard thing that lots of districts do with their municipalities. As we learned recently, the city is allowed by statute, state statute, to loan to us for 90 days maximum with no interest rate. So that is something that cities are allowed to do. They are not allowed to charge us an interest rate. Yes, David?
When you say allowed, they obligated if asked, or you say allowed?
Yeah, I asked that question of Joe, and it's unclear. He was gonna get back on that. I believe they are sort of, I don't think it's obligated as they have to, but I think that it's encouraged and it's often done. It wouldn't be unusual for this to happen. So, and what we're asking here is that we would ask for a short-term loan, no interest loan, for a very short period of time until the banks come through and agree. Generally, to get one of those bank loans I was talking about set up can take maybe anywhere from, 24 hours to 2 weeks, but because of our situation, because our funds were mingled with the cities, it's taking a little bit longer, so we may have to wait a little bit longer to get that through. So what this resolution does is that it asks us as a board to approve basically 3 things. The first is the separation of the funds from the city. That's the very bottom. The second is going to the city and asking for a short-term interest-free loan to cover us while we're waiting for the banks to come through. And the third is to go to the banks and to put out an RFP and to enter into an agreement with them if it's a good agreement. So that's what this resolution says. For those of you who haven't read a lot of resolutions before, this is a formal one. So the first half kind of explains it, and then the second 3 points where it says 1, 2, 3, restate the key points. So if you want to just get the meat of it, just read the bottom two, 1, 2, and 3. And that basically tells you what the resolution is about. So if you want to just take a minute and read that, yes. Mark?
So on the top, we see some constraints that are built.
Yes.
Well, I'm assuming the constraints, but I might not be. So I could read that to say that you only want to be able to borrow the loan up and equal to the amount of the grants that are going to get awarded only for that period that we're saying here.
Yeah.
Or we could say, I could understand it to say, I want to have the line of credit open at any time I fall to the negative cash flows, and that line of credit will be no higher. I know you're saying 4.8 million, but that might change. So that line of credit would be no higher than
4.8, that's what it's saying.
Than the line of credit, than the state assumption of how much, grants, than the value of the grants.
Right.
So that might be 5 million next year, it might be 5.2 million.
Well, let me point something out though. The 4.8 is really around the city. If you look carefully at the language, the 4.8 is only attached to the city loan. The other loan is more like what you're saying. It's saying that it would be a line of credit up to the value of the grants. So this resolution is talking about, we're not saying to the bank we only want to borrow $4.8 million. We're saying to the city, that's what we want to borrow. But to the bank, we're saying we want to set up a line of credit up to.
So are we going to have to go through this every year?
I think what happens is that we set it up with the bank, and Miranda, maybe I'm less familiar than you are, but once we set up this Gantt, is it set up and can we count on the bank continuing to work with us over time?
It depends.
Mm-hmm.
It depends on how the RFP is written.
Yep.
And I think, I don't think this one was written with continuing years in it, so
Okay.
we might have to do this again next year. But it also depends on what the terms, that the banks come back with the terms and what we agree to.
Right. So one of the things I know, Mark, is that when we wrote the RFP, we did it in mind with the way that we would make ourselves most attractive to the banks because we do have some negatives, So I imagine that one of the things that went into the thought was let's try and do this as a one-time thing as opposed to creating anything that would lengthen the process. So I don't know the answer. I can definitely find that out for you, but I think the focus has been on getting it this time, thinking once we had the relationship set up, we could then work with them.
Right, okay. So in anticipation of we're going to hit a low again. I saw this happens all the time, right?
Our expectation is once this is in place, this will be how we'll manage our ups and downs because we no longer have the suite. So yes, if it's not this bank that we enter into, it has to be another bank. So we are going to need this kind of relationship.
Okay. And obviously the preference is to the city loaning us at zero interest compared to a bank earning an interest on it.
Right. One of the issues though around the city is that there are you can't keep taking the loan over and over again. So the city loan needs to be more like a one-time kind of deal, something when we really need it, as opposed to something we depend on 4 times a year. The city is not going, I'm guessing, is not going to be happy to do that. Each time we get a loan from the city, we have to go to the Board of Finance, and we have to go in front of the City Council. Whereas if we set up our own line of credit, in a sense, we work directly with the banks, which is a much more efficient system. I don't know, one second, I don't know what the interest rates are they're coming back with, but I assume they're pretty good. The other thing to think about is one of the things that happened in the sweep account was that we did not get interest on our money that was sitting there. When we move to this new kind of account, we will get money on our money that's sitting there, and in fact we'll end up making money on it because we will make more money over the course of the year than we'll pay in interest. So it actually is a potential financial lift for us.
Because you have positive cash flows for a greater amount than the negative cash flow.
That's my point. So it makes sense financially. Even if it's an interest-free loan over there, this is still a better deal. So that's why we want to move into that.
Do we have any anticipation at all on what the revenues would be on the interest?
No, I don't know what those are. I think we're going to, once we enter into this account, which I think we're supposed to hear from the banks, as I recall, Stephanie, it was Thursday, right? Thursday. So our hope is that by Thursday, we'll at least have a sense of which bank we might be working with. The other thing I want to say, though,
Sorry to
is
bore everybody with this conversation.
no,
You know?
no, it's not boring. It's critical, actually, and I appreciate you asking the questions. Yes,
You
David?
answered the question. It was about the interest.
Okay.
I kind of knew. I just wanted to be clear about it.
Okay.
'Cause I
All
actually
right, so the
did
other
answer.
thing I just wanted to point out about timing on this motion is that, this stuff's happening quick. Like I said before, things happen quick around here. So we're going to approve this motion. We're going to find out about the bank loans on Thursday. We're going to be asking for the money from the city council next Monday. So everything's going quick because it needs to, because we really do need to figure out our cash flow going in through July, which, as I said before, is not an unusual situation.
So we're asking for the one time
From the city, yes.
until the banks get involved.
And it could
Only
be.
because of the show. I'm good.
Yeah,
I'm good.
could be just a few days.
You got me.
Yes.
No. I was nodding to Mark.
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay. All right, so phew, any other questions, thoughts, comments? Yes, Alan?
I've sat in meetings with the city where they kind of said, okay, yeah, here's a good idea, let's go ahead and do it. And then we go talk to Board of Finance, and they say something completely different.
Yeah.
Is the city aware that we might come to them after this resolution?
Yes, they are aware. We've been meeting as a team with the administration, with some people from the city. Bob Rustin and Miranda have been working closely together. The city is aware. My understanding is that the mayor's office is generally supportive of this idea.
Yeah, they have been. It was the
Yeah.
council who seemed like
Yeah.
we got torpedoed by.
So I think, it's a different situation this time. I feel pretty confident about it. So what we're going to be doing is going in on Monday to the Board of Finance, and that very same night going to the council.
Okay.
And we will be doing some talking, as I believe will the mayor's office to help. But I would
Okay, good.
encourage, anyone who has a good connection with their council member, if anyone has questions, they're more than welcome. You can direct them to me if you don't have the answers yourself. Yeah.
And the other is that Stephanie, myself, Joe maybe, I don't know if you're going to, Miriam, are going to be meeting with the mayor's office to do some strategizing on Friday in advance of going to the Board of Finance.
Okay, and as one of the things that that Patrick pointed out is one of the problems last time when we went for money was that we went as a board and didn't have representation of the administration with us. So this time we're going to come with a team that really indicates to the council that our administration is on board and knows what's going on. I think that would be helpful.
Let me just add, the whole tax and participation note, everything like that, if we're going to move out of the cash pool, it's the way to go. Totally in support.
Thank you.
All these things. I'm really glad that putting the work in to do this. My quick question is, what are the banks that do you know the banks?
Yeah, I do believe we've got TD, Merchants, Peoples.
Send it to TD, Merchants, Northfield Savings.
And Key. And Key.
Okay, so not People's. Okay.
No, Peoples I think was originally looked at, but I think they don't like to deal with this, just have deficits, I think is what yeah.
Is there a reason why we're only looking at banks and not credit unions? Like, do they not offer credit for this?
That's a good question. I don't know. I left, the banks that we looked at to the administration to determine where to send the RFP. I don't know.
A big part of it is the bank has to be big enough to handle our cash flow that we're asking. And I don't know if savings are necessarily large enough to do that. And I just went with names and contacts that I was given.
The reason I asked, just to put it out there, is because credit unions are cooperatively owned, and I just think that that's important. But that's why I asked. It's not questioning anyone's judgment, but I just want to put it out there as a thought to consider. So thank you.
And I think some of them are state and New England.
Do you think they're big enough?
Yeah, they're not state, definitely.
I mean, one thing I would say is I think this is great. This is a great idea, Brian, and I think that this is the kind of thing that we're working quickly, but we're going to have this relationship with banks ongoing for a while, and I would be very happy to entertain looking and expanding as we go forward. Just this time around, we kind of had to do what we knew. Yes.
Oh, she was first.
Yes.
So again, it's a lot of this was grounded in the fact that things needed to happen very quickly, and so, there's always an opportunity to get to a platform where we can do things better and, include more alternative ideas. But another piece of this is that when we do this, there's some indication that we may need to change our accounts, like with a lender, and so there may be a condition that we move our financial accounts to the lender. And so doing that just raised questions about, you know, comfort level, risk, and not that credit unions are risky, I only use credit unions, but personally. But also the other issue was that we went with institutions that had familiarity with doing educational lending, which is, you know, a business model for different lenders, and credit unions typically don't do, you know, lending to public school districts, so it's just more of a business model fit.
Have we received our pilot funds and all of our payments from the city yet, or are we still waiting for all that?
No, all that was settled out. When we actually split the funds, a lot of effort went into sitting down and working it out, and what they owed and what we owed, and at the end it came out pretty close. They owed us, what was it, $22,000 when it all was said and done. So yes, we got our pilot funds.
Okay, was it what was anticipated, or was it less?
It was slightly, a little bit less, wasn't it? I thought it was, instead of one.
What was
I thought we were talking 1.4 though, and I
originally,
thought I heard
it was 1.4.
1 point, a little more than that. Oh,
okay,
excellent.
so it was
Yes.
close to what it was anticipated. All right.
Yeah, so that's all sugared out. So there's no more.
And we can expect pilot funds for one more year as per our agreement. Is that correct?
Yes. Well, for this year. Going
What's
forward.
it, for 15?
Yeah.
Fiscal year 15.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and then they're done.
Right. I understood that. All right. Thank you.
Any other questions? Oh, yes, Ben.
Is the version that handed out final? Because I was just noting a few typos.
There's typos. I said that at the
Okay.
beginning. There are three different typos, including ask 260, which was a cute one. Yes, it got put on just today. I wanted everyone to get a chance to see it, but I found 3 typos. If you found more than that, do let me know, and we'll send them in to Stephanie, and we'll get that done. Yes, Liz.
I just wanted to acknowledge all the work Miranda did, turning herself inside out to get this done, and it was really, you know, a lot of work, so thank you.
I'm going to go, well, no, this is not to the motion, so I'm going to be quiet.
All right. Shall we?
So, any further questions or comment on the motion? All right, all in favor in the motion everyone has on the board docs to approve the line of credit, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Now I'll say that I think one of the fortunate things that's come out of the last couple of months is I have become increasingly aware of the talent that exists and the not just the senior directors, but in this building, and Miranda, thank you, and we already mentioned Stephanie and Nikki and Paul DeVerne, you're here as well. Thank you so much for the time and the talent that people are showing. So can't say that enough. Ben, policy?
I'll be brief, one, because I can't get my computer to turn on, so I'm looking at my very vague scrawl from our meeting. Our minutes will be submitted to the board for next meeting. When you get those minutes, you'll see what we were talking about. But in general, we're going to be starting to put together the higher level work plan and the items that we're going to be focusing on, including we've got a schedule review for what I believe are the 4 remaining required policies. Not that they need to come up, but to start to review them as we've been doing that. Primary focus I think we were talking about was the superintendent's evaluation and getting back on top of that as a formal process, focusing on that and addressing how to adapt that if needs to be adapted for the purposes of the interim situation we're in now, and a timing for, to see how best it can work with the permanent superintendent search. One of the things I did want to put out there that we've been discussing, and I'm just speaking for myself at this point, putting it out to other members, is one of the areas that we're looking at is to perhaps expand the scope of the committee to include governance. And what does that necessarily mean, such as board operations and structure, oversight of the district organization, et cetera. So I wanted to invite other members to think about that a little bit and envision as you see what the board's responsibility for governance might be and how that might fit into a committee structure, to feel free to share that with me, and we'll be discussing that on the committee level and bringing that back to the board for consideration at some point. Finally, kind of going a little bit to what we were discussing earlier, is I'd like to get some guidance on how to explore changes to the meeting dates. Well, our scheduled meeting date and time doesn't work for all our committee members. I didn't want us to fall into, everybody changing, and I know it's always chaotic in the summer, but I thought perhaps that could be something for planning committee maybe to talk about, and we can revisit, unless that's just something of the prerogative of the chair. Because we're going to talk about what, informally, what days and times work best, and there's so many moving parts to that. I don't want to do it in a vacuum.
Thanks for bringing that. We've had a lot of turnover in committees here since our last month, the last month, and changes around and new members and people moving from one committee to the other. So I think it's a good time to take a few minutes, and I'll send something out to the chairs the next few days, just to get an idea of, I don't know, rank ordering where you want to go, and so that we. I'll let the chairs communicate with the members of their committee to find out what's best.
Well, since I still kind of have the floor, members of my committee, please let me know your preferred dates and times. Thank you.
Can I just say something about that? It's also, I understand, depends on who will be in the building that night. So, there needs to. Stephanie needs to be looped in terms of orchestrating who's available when the building's available.
Right,
there's some limitations on that.
Some limitations on just, we have to have enough advance notice that if, for some reason, one of the administrators is not going to be here, that we arrange with facilities to lock and unlock the building, so.
Can I just add on to that? At Planning Committee, there was also a request for somehow bringing some more structure to the minute taking, because when people change up their meetings, it means that Marianne has to find a minute taker and cancel the minute taker, and it's a hard thing to remember, and so it can often be last minute, and so it's something to be aware of. And Policy Committee, I believe, was asked to kind of create some kind of procedures. There's also been changes to open meeting law recently that affect minutes, so that because we have a website, we need to post at least unofficial minutes on the website within 5 days of any meeting. So that will have an impact on administrative staff. There are ways to structure minutes based on open meeting law. You only have to include who made a motion, who seconded it, and what the vote was, any decision that was made, who was present, what time the meeting opened, what time it closed. So those are the bare minimum. We could do that within 5 days, but just be aware that it's a constraint that staff are operating with. So expectations should, probably be in line with what's possible.
Okay, we have a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Seconded by Brian. All in favor?
Aye.